saw me counting down. You caught me. Hi, good morning.
Hi, Crystal.
How's your day going? I guess it's Monday for us, even though it's Tuesday.
Yeah. So far so good.
Good. I know. Though yesterday did feel like Sunday.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're having dinner with some friends, and I was like, man, it really feels like Sunday. But then I was like, all my meetings today, I was like, oh no, it's Monday or Tuesday. But thank you so much for joining me for this webinar about the 7 most common dilemmas that researchers face. I'm really excited to have you here as my practitioner to really guide us through some of the answers to these dilemmas, right? They're only a dilemma until you have the answer.
Right, exactly.
And so if you're watching us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, we are so excited you're here. And we're really grateful that you were able to join us for the next hour to 45 minutes, maybe only 45 minutes of content and this kind of live demo of how QuestionPro can help you with these dilemmas. But in general, if you're a researcher in the world, you don't have to use QuestionPro for us to help you. We are happy to help anyone as they are on their market research journey. So let us know where you are or where you're from in the chat window. I'm currently based in Topeka, Kansas, which is not my normal home base. And Christine, where are you?
I'm in Madison, Wisconsin.
Ooh, I love that every once in a while you can hear you have a little accent.
Yeah.
Which I feel like you should just tell people you're Canadian, and then they'd be like,
well,
so cool.
And I one of my degrees is in Scandinavian studies, and I learned Norwegian. So like my O's sometimes are really long, and yeah. So
that's so fun. The only other language I ever learned was like 5 years of Latin.
Oh, hey,
so
that's handy.
You know, I can read a lot of languages. I cannot speak them.
Yeah.
But you know, let us know where you're from and what language you speak. And we are so excited that you're here. And I'm going to share my screen and kind of just like walk through kind of what we're going to be doing today, and then we'll dive in to our dilemmas and our answers to those dilemmas. So if you didn't know, QuestionPro. Oh, well, if you didn't know, this is me and Christine. Christine is our director for academic and nonprofit in the US and North America and can help you with so many things. And then I'm Crystal Weiss. I'm the director of marketing here at QuestionPro. I'm sure you see me. If you watch us live, you see me all over the place. So then we also have a full service suite. In case you were wondering, we have our survey software, which is the most easy to use survey software out there, starting with a free edition and working our way up. We also have more advanced survey software for research, like, cost analysis and et cetera. We can talk about that shortly. Then we have customer experience and employee experience. So always making sure you have your pulse on your customers and your employees. And a lot of times those two tie together because happier employees mean happier customers. And then we have our research platform, which really, Christine, this is your bread and butter.
Yeah. Yep.
So can you tell us a little bit about what each different product line brings to the table and how you use them?
Sure. So, of course, we have our basic surveys. It comes with every license that we offer. But then, in addition to that, in addition to just doing, qualitative or quantitative surveys, whatever you're into, we actually have this really awesome product called Communities, where especially now post-pandemic, but still kind of in that gray area. Communities is such an asset to a lot of businesses, to academic users, because you can get this group of people together and you can follow them in like a longitudinal study. You can keep checking in with them. Businesses and corporations use it for marketing and customer experience surveys. Yep. You can do like one-on-ones. You can do group things.
They even have a focus group option now where you can have like a moderator room, but it's all on Zoom. Like, it's so cool. Yeah. I think Communities is QuestionPro's best kept secret that shouldn't be a secret.
Right.
I think it's like the coolest product we have. And then people and then I'm always like, hello.
Well, and before you had to, when you were doing focus groups, you have to get all these people together. You'd have to coordinate schedules, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can get people from all over the world together to do your focus group. So,
Right.
I mean, you can get so much.
It really also creates better data, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
not like excluding different people. On X Day next week, on Research Monday, we're actually having Tim Cornelius talk about panel exclusion and how you really need to be more inclusive as you build your panels and your focus groups. Because if you're not including, let's say 35% of the US population, like you're not really getting a true segment of who your customer could be. And something that Tim has done a really good job with is adding a economic value to that because of how much buying power they have. People always assume that X people won't buy my product, so why do I need to research them? And you're like, but if you're not researching them, they might be buying your product and you didn't know. Or why wouldn't you want to market into that demographic with, $100,000 worth of buying power?
Right. Exactly.
So,
exactly.
I don't know. It seems if on Research Monday next week, June 6th, join us at 2:00 and Tim will be talking about that.
Yay!
I know. X Day next week is going to be so fun. Also,
well, first of all, I just want to say I'm so happy that research is getting its own day. I mean, I might be a little biased, but
everyone's biased towards their own product. And I'm always just in the middle trying to be like, I literally said, I was like, every product gets equal billing. And then every product manager like rolls their eyes. And I'm like, no, every product is important.
Yes. Yeah.
Every product is special. But we do have, you can tell we have some biases.
Yeah.
And so we also have audience and service and partnerships. And the services department really brought on Patrick Jones lately. He's been on Live with Dan and really can tell if you don't have a market research department or you don't have enough people to do your full service product, like research studies, we not only build the software, we execute it for you.
Yes.
So it's going to be really fun. Well, let's dive in then to kind of, what we're doing, what we're covering. And please remember that if you have questions, just drop them into the chat. We will 99% of the chance answer them. Okay, so the first most common dilemmas, are we asking the right questions?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Have I phrased it correctly? Keep going.
This is a really big one. In addition to everything that you have on there, it's so easy to do like leading questions, especially if you're trying to do market research and you say like how great your product is. Well, how is the person supposed to respond? Or, doing too many open-ended questions and people just get a little survey fatigue or, don't know how to answer them. So
right. I always put like NA, like not applicable in it. I'm just like, get me out of here.
Right. And the most important thing to remember when you're thinking about your questions and how you're phrasing them, there's this really great book that came out in 2017, like just after the election when all the pollers were wrong, blah, blah, blah. It's called Everybody Lies, and it's about big data and the internet and how they can actually go in and look at Google searches to find out, if they would have looked at the Google searches, they would have been able to predict the outcome.
And like Google Trends.
Right. Yes.
Right. Interesting. And that I think is like, even the other day I was kind of explaining to some people, someone in my group of friends said, I just get annoyed when they always ask the same question. Like you answer 10 questions and then they ask the same questions again, but different. And I'm like, well, technically those are good market researchers then. Because they're trying to make sure that you're answering truthfully, that you like from one question to the next question, you believe the same thing. And you're not just trying to speed through or lie or, really kind of dig into what you're meaning. And I think that is something in the effort for we always are like 15-minute long surveys are too long. So ask a 1-question survey. And then somewhere in the middle, market researchers go, well, if I got him, I'm going to ask him.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, I see what you did there. But like somewhere in the middle, the happy medium, I think is really hard for research because sometimes you're right. I want to ask all the things, I need to make sure that the data that's coming out is important. So because everyone does lie.
Yep.
But how do you do that we'll be talking about, programming surveys farther down because that's also a dilemma.
Yep. Yep.
And I think a good one on here is what about GDPR? Because we're definitely starting to see that come through even in the states, because states individually are starting to pass laws. There's no federal law yet about data collection.
Yes.
But it is something that you have to be cognizant of. How do you guys deal with that from an anonymity perspective and a data storage perspective?
So we have a couple little features, which we're going to do a couple demos later on, and I will point those out. But we do have some features that you can click on, and it will just assure that there will be a little footnote on every single page as the person's taking the survey, saying that you're completely anonymous. All your data is private. Nobody can ever, it says it much more eloquently than that, but there's a footer to let people know that, feel free to respond because we're not tracking you. So,
right. That's awesome. And I think that that's really important because a lot of people do worry about that, especially when they're getting surveys from their doctor's office or from the government, or, they want to be able to share their experiences, but they also don't want to necessarily have it tracked back to them.
Right.
Where in some cases for like airlines, I definitely want it tracked. I want you to know how upset I am.
Right.
And then in what cases do demographic questions are needed or not needed? Do you think that sometimes people ask too many questions in the effort just to know things versus like the study actually needing them?
So there's a couple different ways to look at it. One, if you know the list that you're sending it out to, you probably have that information already. So why would you waste time asking those questions? Two, if you do any kind of an audience with us, with QuestionPro, we have that information because we track all of that.
Right.
So we can give you that in the background. And even if you want to keep it anonymous, we can just give you the stats of like how many men, women, ages, locations. I mean, we can give you all of that information if you need it later on. But if you're doing maybe like you're just throwing a link out there on a website to try to get some feedback and you have no idea who's responding, well, then maybe you do have to collect some of that data.
Yeah. You have to think about your distribution almost. Like if you're emailing a list of people you already have, like don't ask them to enter their email.
Right. How did you get the survey?
Right? Like, So I guess like that's like little things that, but it's like, oh, you're feeling like, let me build a survey. Got to put these in first, but really being cognizant of that just from the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's also a lot of resources that QuestionPro has as far as pre-written questions. We have lots of survey templates that you can import into your account. We also have survey templates within the QuestionPro app already. And so I think the hardest part about building a survey is writing the questions or even like thinking of the questions. I'm not going to lie. But thankfully, we have all the resources available for you guys. We also have a lot of blog posts that have a lot of questions in them too, and answers. I always put the answers in there too. Because like, who wants to go through all that trouble? Okay. Oh, well, this is a great follow-up. What is the right question type for a question? You just talked about having way too many open-ended questions.
Right.
And I do remember on like maybe my second week, very early in my QuestionPro career, I like said something about multiple choice questions, and Dan Fleetwood turned around and was like, multiple choice questions are the worst type of questions. And it was probably dramatic effect added, but I definitely never realized that. I thought that's just the easiest way. You give people multiple choices. So tell us then about Christine, what's your favorite question type?
Boy, my favorite question type?
You're gonna say multiple choice.
Well, actually, so we have the ability to do like a multiple choice or just a choose one, choose multiple, whatever. And then you can have this like dynamic text box kind of jump out after they answer, and then they can put in a follow-up. So those are really handy. It really, you know, with all of this, all of these dilemmas that we're talking about, they're all a little bit different depending on the kind of research you're doing. So if it's market research, if it's social sciences, blah, blah, blah. But the base problem is always the same. So you really need to be able to think through what you want, like what you're trying to accomplish, and almost work backwards. So like, what information are you trying to figure out? And then how are you going to get there?
I like that. I like how you avoided my question.
You know, I mean, there's so many different, it depends on like, if you're just trying to do some sort of like quantitative analysis, well then just a 10-point scale or something is perfect, right? I mean, that's what you need. But, you know, if you're actually trying to figure out why someone's doing something, you need a little bit more context. You need a little bit more data. You need a little bit more engagement from the user. So,
and I think that comes also knowing the product a little bit, knowing that there's a multiple choice text follow-up. That's really some of those secret QuestionPro, there might not be secret, but you know, they're the little tips and tricks when you're learning and how to like build those more robust surveys. I know our NPS on the CX platform, our NPS question does that, where it actually does a follow-up. Hey, why did you give us an 8, a 9, or a 4, or a 1? And they call it NPS plus because it gives you the sentiment along with your NPS score. And so really understanding the why someone answered something, I think is, you're not going to, you could, I don't know, put a lot of what we think the reason they answered, you know, a lot of our agenda onto their answer. Whereas like, you don't want to do that. You want to really be a true representation. And then this is a really good one: star rating or smiley face.
You know, we do actually have a lot of different smiley face options. I mean, they're different.
You can upload your own smiley face.
Whatever. Yes. Colors, everything. So that does kind of, especially if you're taking a survey that maybe not the most exciting to take, it does kind of give you a little pop of surprise when you see something like that. So I wouldn't say totally avoid it. You know, use them in moderation depending on your audience. But yeah, it's just kind of, it's nice to see something different every so often. And
do you think that, oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I don't really know between stars and smiley faces.
I was going to ask you, do you think there's some psychology around stars versus smiley faces? Like when you're rating things. So would a star, would you apply that to like a product versus a smiley face to an experience? Just knowing the human psychology of how we use emojis also.
Yeah. I never really thought about that, but that makes total sense.
And because there's also an entire psychology into the different colored hearts you use when you're texting. And you know, and so like red hearts only for people you love. I use the blue heart for work people so that they don't think I'm being weird. Like I use the purple heart for like when I'm like hearting at like a guy's comment. Like I have a whole system. And so based on just like the psychology of colors and like this, like how we use emojis now, that would be an interesting study for someone out there.
Yeah. And when you do it, let us know.
Yeah, hearts or stars versus smiley faces, guys. This is the hot topic which you came to this webinar for. And then we have a couple more. You know, we talked about NPS, but then it comes to, I know we have really more advanced question types like rank order and drag and drop, and we have things like the Van Westendorp pricing models. And when people are not necessarily trained market researchers, right? How do you suggest they learn to use those more advanced questions? Is it trial and error? Is it finding a mentor? Is it, you know, just kind of like figuring it out? What do you suggest for people using those more advanced question types?
I mean, there are a lot of different ways, obviously, and I would probably recommend doing a little bit of both, talking to other people that you know that might be in the industry that have used them. Obviously, you need to kind of play around with them yourself, send them to like a test audience or something. But QuestionPro has a ton of information. We have blogs. Dan Fleetwood does his Live with Dan, and he's always talking about these.
Shout out to Dan.
So, you know, if you, and Dan also brings on guests who you know, are using this from the industry, and they can give you pro tips on like, do you use the max diff or do you use conjoint, or, you know, like
hot take.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so much information, and it's just something, it's a continuous learning curve on all of this stuff, which is good. It should be. That's what it's all about, right?
Do you, so as market researchers, as a practitioner, do you find that you like get stuck in like a loop sometimes, or you're like, oh, I use max diff instead of conjoint, so I'll never use conjoint? Do you guys find, do you tend to find practitioners who have certain styles, and then like they kind of, do you guys get stuck in them ever?
Well, there again, you know, you pick your question type based on how you're going to analyze it at the end.
Okay.
So, if you're familiar with doing something a certain way and it's been working for you, or you know that you can find the analysis to answer the question by using X, then chances are you probably are going to stick with that, unless someone really, you know, blows your mind on some sort of a, you know, like, oh, you should have been doing this. And then they're like, oh, so yeah, I would say that that's probably fairly common.
Okay. Targeting the right audience. Ooh, surveys in local languages. Time zones, I think, would be a thing here too.
Yes. Yep.
So
definitely.
What do you think people struggle with when finding the right audience? I guess it goes back to what you're saying. You have to know your end goal.
Yep. Right. So here's a little story. This is actually a famous study that was done by some economists who just won the Nobel Peace Prize for this study. But they wanted to know if serving in the Vietnam War actually affected income, lifetime income levels, right? But then they started thinking about it, and it's like, well, maybe people who signed up for service or actually, you know, decided to went even during the draft, maybe they were of a certain personality type or something that then would have allowed them to do better in life in general, and blah, 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 blah. Oh. So they had to come up with this like a third variable that affected parts of it, but not others. So basically they went for the draft number. So they did a natural experiment, and they compared people who were drafted and went versus people who were not drafted and stayed home. And so that draft number then became the most important variable in their study, but it really had nothing to do with what they were looking for. So
that's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Instrumental variables, everybody. Look it up. So exciting. But you know, that's the thing. You have to make sure that you're not that you're controlling for the things that you need to be controlling for. So you need to make sure that your audience is actually made up of the people who are being affected by whatever it is you're testing for.
Interesting. Oh, I'll have to look that up. That's fascinating. And I mean, they could recreate that study in almost now in a lot of different like deployment situations, or even, I mean, you could see like they need to run that study on millennials who graduated during the recession.
There you go.
Because anyways, this is just like a personal plug there for my
right.
And, you know, because then it's like, okay, well, you could run that on a lot of different audiences, but keeping the variable and then making sure you're not just saying like, oh, I want to distribute this and we'll find out who, like, let's get 1,000 respondents and then you only have 20 that were deployed in the Vietnam War. It's like, no, you need to really pursue both sides of that.
Another one is like wages and education. People are always like, you know, is there an ability that we just can't test for, like, you know, an ability level that we're not able to test for that is affecting this? So you have to think of something else. So like a common one is they'll use test scores. instead of using.
What about bad tester? That's a terrible one.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's great. But...
Come on. give us like shiny like social butterflies over here at Chance. C's and D's earn degrees.
That's true. That's true.
My degree looks just as good as anybody else's with a bachelor's. Nobody needs to know my scores.
Well, in a lot of companies, actually, there have been a couple studies that they look for people with B's and C's because it generally means that they are a little bit wider, have a little bit wider range of knowledge and experience because they're not just focused on getting the good grades.
That's me doing
use that.
But that's, I mean, I think that's hard when it is hard though, because there are a lot of unseen variables.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we see this in polling data a lot of times. Like you have to think about who's taking these polls at like 3:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday.
Exactly.
And really kind of take some of that information into consideration, or be really intentional and use QuestionPro audience to field a panel.
Good one. Yeah.
Super subtle. So tell us, can you talk to a little bit about how our panels are built? So if you are looking for the right audience, like there are resources for you to find like very bizarrely niched people.
Yes. We just had one. Someone was working on his PhD about basically pandemic readiness in the future, whatever. So he wanted to talk to, he wanted to ask open-ended questions, which first of all is really hard to find a panel for. Almost nobody's going to agree to just do a bunch of open-ended questions for you. And he wanted to talk to medical administrators and like people higher up in the hospital systems. So those people have limited amount of time,
to do open-ended questions.
Yes. And then he wanted to do a follow-up in-person interview via Zoom. And our audience team, I don't even know how they got this together, but they delivered. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, they were able to find him not only hospital administrators who would take their open-ended question, but then agreed to do a follow-up interview with them.
That's crazy.
Yeah. No, it like people might think that doesn't sound crazy, but you have no idea.
You have no idea. I love that. That's so good to know. Yeah, there definitely is a lot of options out there. And now tell me, what was the phrase you used around the Economist study?
Instrumental variables.
Instrumental variables. Okay, that sounds like something we need to do a webinar on. Because, girl, one of the marketing team members who's kind of in the background right now, you guys don't see her. She just sent me a message. She's like, "You're learning so much through office hours. Great job, Crystal." And then you drop instrumental variables, and I was like, I don't know what that is. So that sounds definitely like something we need to do a webinar on, and really kind of like, again, we're not here just to do like multiple choice questions. And well, Christine and I have a lot of fun. We do have really exemplary teams working behind the scenes to find you advanced panels and help you do really advanced studies.
Yes. Yeah.
Instrumental variables. I'm gonna remember that one. Here we go. Oh, this is a good one. I know this one because I wrote the blog post on this. What's the best time to send a survey? These graphs right here are actually based on research we did within surveys sent from QuestionPro.
I believe it. So if you think about the work week, by like Thursday afternoon, definitely Friday, people are already checked out for the week.
Yeah, you can't even send a newsletter then.
Right. Nobody does anything on the weekend. And then Monday, people are fresh, but their inbox is probably full from everything that they didn't check on Friday, for example. So it kind of makes sense that Tuesday would be the best day to send it. And I have heard that Thursday is like a follow-up, but on this chart, it looks like actually Monday would be a little bit better than Thursday. Right. And so,
sorry, I got really close to the camera. Yeah.
And the timing makes sense too. So you get into the office generally around 8ish. Most people give them a couple of hours to get through, get settled, get their coffee, blah blah blah. And so then around 10, 11, they have time to really start scanning things and looking through things. So
I also find it fascinating that week 2 is the worst week of the month to send it.
Yeah, me too. I was surprised about week 4 for some reason. I mean,
well, I think if you're, all of our sales guys, like I got a meeting moved today because they were like, we're busy. But at the end of the month, depending on how your week's gone, like depending on what you're looking for, if you're doing surveys for money, the end of the month may be a good way to kind of like offset that. But this also follows a lot of marketing trends when it comes to sending emails. These are really kind of the trends we've learned to follow. Like, don't you send press releases out on Tuesdays. If it's bad news, press releases go out on Friday at 4:59.
Crystal, have you worked in
what? And so, this really kind of follows those trends, but almost to a detriment these days a little bit. Like, I'd be interested in running this again. This is a couple years old. And because the other day, I think it was between 9:50 and like 10:20, I probably got 30 marketing emails. Right. And just like a newsletter of this. And it's like everyone's using whatever device, HubSpot or Marketo or, Pardot or MailChimp. And they all have like, send at like smart time. And so all those systems are kind of programmed against data like this. And I screenshotted it and sent it to the marketing team and was like, everybody's sending their emails at 10 a.m. Like, and so then it's kind of like, does that work against you? Does it work for you? It's definitely, I think maybe like everyone's doing it now. So is it still true?
Well, and also the pandemic and people working from home and working remotely, I mean, that has really turned everything upside down. So it would be really interesting to see if this.
I know, it's like we should run the study again. I think this was this was probably like, I hadn't worked here very long. It was probably January 2020. And so before everything kind of
got real crazy.
It's just like crazy to think about. I worked here like 4 months and then was like, okay, bye everyone, going home. Okay, so we dropped the link to the blog in the comments, and you can definitely read more about this there. It's super easy to do in QuestionPro. You can just schedule it at whatever time. You can do automated follow-ups, all sorts of things in the distribution tab. Ooh, here's a good one. This might be something we screen share on a little bit, Christine, because I find the reporting to be the most challenging thing to learn, because the other day tried to do something, and because I didn't set up the survey to do the reporting right before we opened it, I couldn't change it afterwards. So how might one help me?
So you want me to just share my screen now?
Yeah, let's walk through some reporting so we can show how to share reports with stakeholders, how to use share report. Can you share reports in someone's local language?
Yeah, well, actually, some of that can be done with like the more common languages, but that's still something that we're working on.
Okay.
Doing all the reporting, like doing analysis and everything in multiple different languages. But okay, so if you log into our system, this is what it looks like. And
welcome to QuestionPro.
So I'll just go into one that I actually have a little bit of data with. Let's see here. So I sent this out to my wonderful colleagues at QuestionPro, and they were nice enough to answer. So as you can see, I have some people from all over the world. And like we were talking about before, with really having things planned out prior to going in, and especially having a second, third, fourth pair of eyes look at your survey before you send it out, you might be able to check on a couple of things. So for example, if you're trying to do, choice model, either of these, for example, you need to have those questions done. Like you need to have those questions chosen and set up that way first, because you can't go back and do it. So if I click on this,
what?
It's going to say, oh, you don't have any questions that use
Okay.
that. Oh, true. I don't, because I didn't use that. So that's really important. You need to, have those things figured out beforehand. So we kind of hit on all the different question types that we have, but I'll just quickly show you. So this is where everything is. This is, like our basic level, which I think goes all the way up to the advanced. Have access to all of these. So, I mean, you have maps, you have, you can put in text, rank ordering. Here's your,
here's your smiley star and thumbs up.
There you go. Here you're open-ended. And then here's where you get into the advanced ones. And these are the ones that are really important to decide that you want to do when you're creating your survey, because there are special analysis tools specifically for these questions.
Okay.
So here's your net promoter score. If you just give someone a 10-point scale on a basic question, you're going to get the number, but you're not going to get the background analysis, and you're not going to get the in-depth why that would come with this. So you need to make sure that you choose this question, for example. And that's just, here are your pricing analysis ones that you're talking about. Again, if you can ask these exact same questions, but if you haven't done it through this question type, then you don't get the back end analysis.
Okay, so I'm seeing what you're saying. So in basics, I could ask this question as let's say not a multiple choice, but a 2-question, a radial button kind of question.
Right.
But in order, and then I would just get the data. I wouldn't get the analysis of weighting and et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. And I'm sorry, I do not have one of these to show you, but
there's entire webinars that we've done about it, and I still don't understand it.
And you can always go to the very top, which I don't know why it's not letting me go to the very top. Here we go. There's this little question mark here, and it takes you to the help center. So anytime you're doing anything and you're like, what was that one thing? You go to the help center, you type in any phrase, any keyword, and it'll come up with a ton of articles, step-by-step pictures, instructions, how-tos, etc. So if you're ever stuck, go to the help.
Christine, are you? Oh no! Are you someone who likes to read the building instructions for furniture?
You know what? I'm so good. I don't even need to.
Oh, snap. I was just man, you love that help center. I don't think I plugged that help center for a year. And every time you're just ask the help center. They're great. I'm I don't ever even go over there. I should.
Oh, you should. You should. There's just
I just
so
make
much
someone teach me. I just reached out to Adrian Mendez, the head of customer success for all of Enterprise. And I'm like, hey, how do I change a color? And he's like,
yeah. No, I do enjoy putting together IKEA furniture. I'm not going to lie to you. I've done a lot of it, and I'm pretty good. At it. But having said that, I mean, I even have a degree in research, and there are just things that I just don't remember, or it's how did you do that again? Or, hey, is there a better way to do this? So you can even type in, tracking, and it'll give you all these different ways that you can track people. And, how are you going to know that if you don't go to the help center? No, I really can't say enough good things about the help center. It's really awesome. So
I love that. Okay, so keep going.
Okay, so then when you're getting into the analytics, the big thing, how am I creating the right report, I think is the question we're on. So again, your question type, circling it back, your question type is the most important thing, because you're not going to be able to get the analysis you want if you haven't set it up correctly in the first place. So, I mean, there's setting it up, there's wording of the question, there's your audience, But all of it kind of goes back to the first thing. Like if you didn't set up your question correctly in the first place, the rest of it is kind of, isn't going to work the way you want it.
Right.
But then when you get into the analysis and analytics, we have so many different things that you can look at. So you can do trend analysis, you can do crosstabs, you can do correlation. And then again, down here are even more of those specialized ones. So you can do hotspot analysis, heat maps, but you have to choose that question before you do it. But we have all of these tools that are specialized to give you the back end analysis without really having to be a data scientist or whatever. Like our programmers have already done the back end work for you. So as long as you have that question put in correctly, you're going to get the
see, and that's what not. And then I did not do that. And then one of our great servicer team members said, well, okay, I can export these 2 questions. I can export all the answers to this, and then I can run this thing in Excel. And I was just like, okay, no, it's not it's just like a fun BuzzFeed quiz. I don't need to but they were like, if you had set it up right, it would have already been done. And I was like,
yeah,
I'm trying.
Yeah, there's a lot of little things to learn, and you learn through mistakes. So now, are you gonna ever make that mistake again?
No, maybe. But I'm gonna be like, hi, can you set this up for me? Thanks.
Right. And then, also, so everyone's kind of like quant is the only way to do research, blah, blah, blah. But I really think qualitative research doesn't get its due. There's just so many interesting things that you can figure out when you ask those backup questions, when you ask open-ended questions, etc. And so this text analysis pretty much covers the qualitative side of things. So,
you know what?
Word cloud.
I'm going to take over your screen for a second because that takes us to the next dilemma.
Right.
Christine and I did not practice this, as you might have noticed, but we're doing a great job. And this takes us to the next kind of dilemmas. Am I seeing the holistic picture? And I think a lot of times qual gets a bad rap because people want just that data that can be automated analyzed. Whereas we have tools that do some analyzing of qual questions, and it really does help you get the whole picture. Can you show us? I'm going to jump back to your screen and you can show us a little bit about that.
So especially if you're doing market research and you're trying to figure out the whys behind things, if you're doing any kind of sociological research and you're trying to figure out the why people are acting the way that they are acting, this is really important. So word clouds, not only do they look pretty, but basically what it really helps you with is if you have an open-ended question and you have 200 people that have answered, it's going to be really difficult for you to go. I mean, it's going to be time consuming to go through and tag all of that and figure it out, blah, blah, blah. So you do a quick word cloud, which is included in most licenses, and you can see right away what are the top words that people are talking about in order of size, right? So that will just give you a quick synopsis, summary of how people were responding. And then if you want to go a little bit more in depth, we have the text analysis and sentiment analysis, where we actually have tools on the back end that can go through and go through your statements and can tag things for you. So they can pick out the most important keywords that people are using. They can pick out if it's a positive, negative, or neutral experience. So we can do the tagging and the data cleanup with some of our analysis tools, saving you valuable time.
And kind of going back to that example you used of our audience team finding, people, panelists who would answer open-ended questions. I'm sure the fielder who wanted those questions really used a lot of these to find more sentiment than just being they 9 people rated us a 10 instead of a 4.
Right.
And so everybody lies. So how do you find the right kind of feeling around how people are really, really interacting with your brand or product or service?
Right. So, I mean, with that one, it was, how prepared do you think you are for the next pandemic? And a hospital administrator doesn't want to be like, we're not at all. But when you can ask those questions with some follow up, or we also have ones where you can see their face, like you can do a live cast analysis. So even if they're saying one thing, but their facial features are showing something else, a different emotion.
I've tried to beat that thing so many times.
Right. I mean, so those are very important for market researchers or people that are really trying to get, to beat that, I don't know.
Answering bias almost.
Right. Like, everybody wants to look good, people don't want to not answer, positively, basically, or in a positive light.
Unless it's for an airline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's the easiest example of people being like, nope. Well, that's great though. And I think that really is, I think there needs to be advocates for both sides, qual and quant, just like there's advocates for both. Like at QuestionPro, we've got the CX, we've got like the NPS people, and we've got the not NPS people. And you know what? We need all kinds.
Yes. I mean, that is how you get the best, because sometimes the qualitative will give you the back end, but it's also a little bit more personal. It's also, a little bit more opinion based. So if you have that quantitative with it, then maybe you can flush out some of that.
Yeah. Well, and then I guess this takes us to the next dilemma. Once you have all that data, how do you make better decisions with it?
Whoa, that's like the $1,000 million question right there.
I have it. So, I guess over under, Christine, how often do people do studies and then not use that data to influence their decision?
Right. Well, I think the most common problem with all of this is that people will do the data, like collect the answers that they think that they want to have answered, but then maybe they're not realizing that, well, this is actually, like, you should actually be looking at this. So a perfect example is what you were talking about at the beginning with, segment bias, where you are only looking at certain populations because in your mind, those are your target audience, and you're not looking at everyone. These blind, unconscious biases that we all have really do affect then the data that you're collecting and the questions that you're trying to answer in the way that when you get your data back. So a big thing that people need to remember is causation versus correlation. Like, throwing it out there for you today. So people have done 1,000 studies that show as ice cream consumption rises, so does violence rates.
What?
Right. But it isn't because people are eating ice cream. It's because both of them happen in the summer when then people are out and have more access to each other and yada. So, you can say it is true. Ice cream consumption and violence both go up, but that's not why.
Yeah. Causation, not correlation.
Right.
Or correlation, not causation. I mean, that is definitely something that is it's something you have to remind yourself of there. But then, it's weird because they also do studies on, like, have you ever heard of like the hemline theory? When we go into a recession, we wear longer dresses.
Oh, really? No.
And it's a whole, like, people are more modest when they're poor, like when they're feeling more like poorer. And it's a whole study that the Forbes not Forbes are right up on it, but it's called the hemline theory around the recessions and hemlines. And it's really, really interesting. But part of me is like, what if we're in a recession? Isn't material more expensive? So I don't know. But it's another one of those things where, like, okay, it's correlation, but it may not be causation. Right. And like, are you putting your unconscious bias on something and making it being like, well, I guess people, when we eat too much ice cream, we cause too much violence.
Yeah.
And so making sure that you're also thinking in the right context. What are the other, what were you talking about earlier? The other like secret parameters.
Yes. That just the unconscious, well, all the little things that are out there that affect it that you just can't control for, you can't really test for. All those variables still have an impact on your research. So you need to be able to make sure that you're controlling for all of that, so that you are getting the right data and you are able to then apply that to whatever question you were trying to figure out.
This just came to mind. Do you think it's harder to do studies in the United States because it's so big versus a country like France? I don't know. Just curious. Because there is so many different variables from state to state. Like you and I were just talking about humidity from, Michigan, but it's like 60 in Kansas today. And if you were to do a like, how's your summer going study, you'd be like, I'm hot. And my mom would be like, I'm cold. And it'd be like,
Right. And then that is true. So in one instance, it is harder because we just have so many different, let's face it, we have just so many different cultures in the United States. A state, like Wisconsin from Illinois, even, we just have different people that settle there. We have different ways of doing things. You've got the Chicago politics, for example. Anyway, just throwing it out there. But so you have that. But on the flip side of that is if you can do a representative sample of the United States,
right,
you're good. You're golden.
Yeah.
Because you have all those different people and different takes and different points of view.
So you just got to be intentional. And I think that comes back to the 7 most common dilemmas we covered. All can be defeated if you are really thoughtful about preparing your studies ahead of time and your questions ahead of time with your end goal analysis needs.
Yes.
And making sure you don't get too caught up on one thing.
Not to like really be a downer on this or whatever, but there are so many studies out there. So if you just do a quick Google Scholar search of a question similar to what you're looking for, you can see how people made mistakes because they'll have their paper,
right?
They'll talk about how they did it. And then at the end, they'll say and this is where we screwed up. So you can say, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something else. So, but if you're just trying to ask how people feel about whatever, just like a basic thing. And this isn't life or death or, or don't stress out. Don't stress out.
There is, and I think that's another thing is if you're, remember the end goal too, when we do a lot of questions, we field a lot of things for social media. And so I don't usually worry too much about bias, or I do it intentionally. And, I'll always get a little tag that's like, that was a leading question. And I was like, I know it was leading. It's clickbait.
There you go.
And so, making sure that I know where those questions belong. And that's not when we're not doing a real study.
Right.
And really making sure you're intentional about your pre-planning, just like you are. You wouldn't I guess this is not true. I was going to say you wouldn't go to the airport without knowing where you're going, but some people do that. I saw
a very small
meme.
percentage.
Right. I saw a meme the other day was that I'm totally go with the flow. Just tell me when the flow starts. So that's, that's me. I forget that there's a whole realm of people who are go with the flow. Maybe be careful with the flow when you're writing research questions.
Right. Especially if someone's paying you or you're getting something in exchange.
That's true. That is true. That's a whole nother webinar about the responsibilities of researchers when they're being paid for research, because that's talk about bias.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was like, we could talk about that for a whole nother hour.
It's a common thing. People do it all the time. That's why you get these huge campaigns that are just really off base. You can Google that and find 1,000 examples. And those are, people getting paid and people that have degrees. And so, it's very easy to do So don't beat yourself up about that as well, but it can be avoided. So,
right. So awesome. Thank you, Christine, for helping me walk through these 7 most common dilemmas. If you're watching us, please make sure to join us next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for QuestionPro X Day. We will be having research themed Monday. So kind of what you were hearing today, along with our, advanced question types. We're doing a product showcase. So you'll be able to see real things like Livecast play out. On Tuesday, we're doing CX Tuesday. We'll be talking about the futuristic of bringing futuristic CX now, because the whole point of customer experience is to improve the future. So how can you bring that in now? And then on Wednesday, we're doing Workforce Wednesday, mostly because I like alliteration. And they will be talking all about your employee experience and how you can be a better company for your employees, which is so important right now as we're still going through the Great Recession or the Great Recession. Oh no, not yet. The Great Resignation. And oops, it's a Freudian slip. So let's make sure to join us on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and we can't wait to see you at our next QuestionPro webinar. See you later, Christine. Yeah, bye.